Is your AP buried in paperwork? Automate your accounts payable and payment process and triple the speed of your invoice processing.
Hey, Gene, how's it going, buddy? Hey, you are crushing those invoices, okay? So, crush this one too. Thanks, bud.
Liberate your AP with Avid Exchange.
Please welcome our next speaker, Tanya Henderson, owner of Test Team. Today, she will be presenting Best BC Reporting, Word, Excel, RDLC, Account, Schedule, and Power BI. Please stick around after Tanya's session for a live Q&A.
Good morning. My name is Tanya Henderson, and I am here in the 2021 Dynamics Con, and I am going to talk about reporting today. And I wanted to have to show my mug too, which goes along with our new conference for 2021. Absolutely love it. Thank you, Molly. So this is what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the reporting. So there is so much reporting in Business Central. And it's kind of like, what am I using for reporting? Do I use Word? Do I use Excel? Do I use account schedules, Power BI? And, you can keep going on. So I have done a little bit through this session, and I am going through and basically touching on all of those functionality just a little bit. You could spend hours and hours in each of these areas, but I've tried to give you a little bit of a snippet of each of the sessions, and then kind of, what you would use those for, and what's the best kind of situation for each of the reporting. So we're going to kind of jump into this now. Again, my name is Tanya Henderson. I was formerly a GP consultant. I've been working with Business Central for about 4 years. I am an implementation consultant, kind of pre-sales person type. I have worked on multiple conferences and committees and presented for a few years. Don't want to age myself, but I've worked with Dynamics Con now for the last 2 years. And I've previously worked with some other conferences for many years. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll kind of jump into this session. So the reporting in Business Central, like I said, there's a lot of different things that you can do. So it's kind of, where do I go to see the different reports? Who can modify the reports? And then kind of when is the best time to use each style? Because that's kind of what I was saying, that I'll kind of go through when I use them. And then, of course, we have, what do they look like from within inside of BC? When I actually find them in BC, what do they look like? And how do I get started on just modifying some of those reports? So this is kind of the standard, what I call the standard reports in Business Central. So in there, you'll see you have your standard reporting. These actually will usually be an Rdlc report, which can be modified with what's called Report Builder. And then you'll have, of course, your Word reports, which is kind of more of the invoice format or purchase order formats, those type of things that you would be almost, I call them customer-facing reports. And then you'll have, again, the Rdlc, which is like a check format. You can do some of these in Word, and then you can also use like a Report Builder or Visual Studio to modify those. Now, if you go to create that report and it shows up blank, that means essentially that format is not available for that type of report. And I will do at the end of this session, I will be actually kind of going through some of that in a demo. So again, standard reports, I will show some of those in Business Central and kind of how you print those. But those would be like an aging or a trial balance, those types of reports. And then this is showing here again on those standard reports. If I print the standard report And then I have an editing version of the standard report. So this report that we're looking at here is actually opened with Report Builder. Or again, Visual Studio is another option that you could use for that. I use Report Builder because I've grown up with it. I think it's pretty easy. Visual Studio will give you a little bit more functionality. So this again, standard report, printed, that's what it would look like. And then if I'm looking at it in an editor view, not the prettiest format in the world, I will tell you that. Very difficult to kind of see what those fields are. So not the most fun reports to work on and modify. So this is now a Word printed version of that. So now I can see what is printed on the left. Okay, so this would be like, again, an invoice format, order form, those type of things. And then you'll see on the right, this is that same exact report in the editor view inside of Word. So you will have to activate the developer tab. There will be an XML pane button up there at the top once you get into Word. And then you'll be able to see off to the right, it'll open that XML pane and you'll be able to drill down and see each of the fields over there on the right-hand side. You do have to pop those open to actually get down to the fields, but you can, drag those into this window and change the fields, or you right-click on them and you can add them with, I think it's plain text view. So you just kind of have to play with that a little bit. But this is the Word editor here. And then, of course, you can also hide fields, move fields off, add new logos, add pictures, things like that. So I kind of call this like a Word template from the environment that I'm used to. So that's kind of how you would do this editing inside of Word. And like I said, I'll kind of show these a little bit and how to export these out of Business Central. And then here's again the Rdlc report. So again, this is opened with Report Builder. This is a check format. So about, I think last summer, they started doing the security blackout on the check. So this is one of the things that you do have to open and modify on your check format. I just created templates for myself and kind of start with them blacked out so that I don't have to go and change that. If anybody needs the code to remove the blackout, it was a little strange for me when I first did it. I did write a blog post about it just so that it would remind me how to do it the next time I needed to go in and remove that. But this is a check. Like I said, I almost always use the Rdlc, and you'll have some of the Micker things, changing margins inside there, things like that. That's just kind of some tips that I have found when modifying those checks, because some of them can be a little bit of a pain to get everything in the right format, especially if you're using a blank format on checks, getting that Micker line to print in the correct place. So again, this is the Rdlc. So this is what this would look like if you were in the editor view, and then of course printed view as well. Okay. So which is better, Word or the Rdlc? Okay, or Report Builder, I should say. So again, on the Word side, the field names are a lot easier to obviously see and know what they are. If you get into the Report Builder, you'll see something that it'll mainly be expressions. So if you've ever worked with like the SSRS reports, that you get into, if everything you did was an expression on an SSRS report, that's kind of what you're seeing inside of Report Builder. It does label the fields as like number 172, number 81. You can, if you're doing reports a lot for that particular report, you'll kind of learn what that field is. A lot of times what I will do is I will print the report out and kind of, lay it next to the format that I'm editing, so I can kind of know what fields it is I'm moving. So that's kind of another little tip for being able to try to kind of move things around and know what's what. On the Word side now too, when I say major modifications, I had a customer who took a purchase order and they actually wanted it landscape instead of portrait. I attempted to do that with Report Builder. It was not very easy to do at all. But in Word, it was actually pretty simple. Another little tip that I tell people to do is add the grid lines for the tables, because when you're inside of Word, it is just a lot of tables. So I'll add the grid lines, put my fields in there, move everything around, and then I'll get rid of the grid lines when I'm finished at the end. So that kind of will help you know where things are rather than just clicking on a blank piece of paper multiple times to figure out what the table structure is on that particular form. So again, just a little tip for that. The word formatting, obviously in Word, you're using the formatting in Word, which makes it so very simple. I want to change a font. I want to change it bold. Very simple to do that. Not that it's difficult in Report Builder, but it's definitely easier inside of Word. And so if we go over to the Report Builder side again, the RDLC, you're going to work with Report Builder or Visual Studio. I know I've said that about 100 times, but you're going to definitely learn those products. It is pretty simple to move some of those fields around on like checks and things. A little tip for that too is instead of actually removing the fields, I will hide the fields instead of removing them. That way, when that customer calls you back and says, hey, can you, put that field back on? It wasn't what I really wanted. All you have to do is go into Report Builder, right click on it, go to the visibility, and then show the field instead of having to go find the field again. So definitely I hide everything. Sometimes I will kind of put, if things are in my way, I will kind of stack things kind of off, in an area so I kind of know what it was. But definitely hiding is a great tip for that rather than removing it. Now, the Report Builder and Visual Studio are definitely a more powerful tool for the report building, I would say, than Word is. So kind of some differences, what's better versus another. But again, most of the time, invoices, orders, things like that, I'm going to use Word. If you're doing some reporting or checks, things like that, I'm going to absolutely use the Report Builder. All right, so now another feature that is not, I don't necessarily call this reporting, but it is the financial reporting inside of Business Central. So people are like, what are account schedules and why do I need them? What do I do with them? And how do I get to them? So account schedules are the financials. I compare them to the advanced financials in Dynamics GP. It's not the functionality of FRX and Management Reporter, but it's definitely better than advanced financials was. So this is all also housed inside of Business Central. So the structure in Business Central for the account schedules is it's using the chart of accounts. So it's using the account categories and the account subcategories. And you can actually generate these account schedules and you could regenerate them if you've made a lot of changes. There's definitely blogs and videos about how to do those two things out there too. So, but once you get your structure on your chart of accounts set up, pretty much your account schedules are already built out for you. So those of us who came from that GP world, I still think of the account schedules as kind of my rows for my financial report. In those rows, you can bold things, you can start things at new pages. So once you get into the account schedule, you choose, whether it's the income statement or balance sheet, and it'll get you, if you start editing, it'll get you into this area. I don't recommend making a copy. If you're going to obviously mess something up, make a copy of it because you can do that very simply. But when it says, it'll come up and say, hey, do you want to make a copy of this or edit the original? Most of the time I'm editing the original because if I make a copy, it'll go change my settings in the general ledger setup area for reporting. So you have to be really careful about that because you may mess up, kind of what report format it's looking at or what row format, as I'll call it. So this here is, again, your row format. And then you'll see that there's also a way to edit the columns. To me, the columns is it where it actually gets pretty strong, and it's much stronger than what you had inside of the advanced financials, is because I can actually do the the columns down to my dimensions. You'll set that up and you'll say, okay, this dimension is going to be this column. And then you can go through and specify or filter values in there. You can also filter periods in there. So if I was doing last period, like a -1, a -2 type thing. So that's where you can have multiple columns on your financials. They don't start out that way. They're not very pretty when you print them the first time, but you can absolutely make them a little bit stronger. And so this right here is kind of, there's an overview and drill down functionality too. So if you have built your account schedules out and you've got your columns there with your dimensions, I use the overview all the time if I'm just doing research. I kind of think of it almost as a smart list and an inquiry window. So you can go into the account schedules. You can click on whichever report you're looking at, maybe the income statement. And then you can go up to the top and just go down to, I think it's under process, and you go under overview. And if you go into overview, it'll show you your row format, and then it'll show you your column format. And then it will also give you the functionality to be able to drill down in this window. So you'll see that anything is teal and underlined. You can click on it and it will drill down and show you what accounts are under that account, under that row, which would be like your subcategories. And then you can see if there's certain dimensions that it's posted to. So I highly recommend the overview. From that same screen, you can drop these into Excel, or you can also print these. So from that same window that you're in on the account schedules, you can go up to print. It will bring up the filtering, and then you can choose what you're wanting to print, what period you're wanting to print this for. And then on the left here on my picture, this is showing what it looks like when it's printed. And then, of course, on the right, I can dump this out to Excel, and it goes out into Excel in a pretty simple format. If I had columns with the account schedules, it would also dump that into Excel. So I've had a lot of customers who will put this data into Excel and use it that way. Like I said, it's not Management Report or an FRX, but it's not horrible either. So I actually like it, especially for my inquiry. Maybe not for something that I'm, sending to a board or something like that, because sometimes you need to do a little bit more. But definitely some very strong, simple financials. So that's a little bit on the account schedule side. And now we're going to go into, I call it the external reporting. So now we have, again, Power BI and Excel, which I use all the time. And they are definitely a little bit different, that how you get into those reporting functionality. So I will touch on that too. And I think we did a session last year, Steve Vindo and I did a session last year that kind of digs into using the APIs. So definitely if you're wanting to kind of learn a little bit more about that, I think I walked through it even more step by step out there on the DynamicsCon last year. So what can I do with those external reports with Power BI? I've written financial statements with Power BI, not necessarily for printing, but again, being able to get that stuff externally, to be able to do some drill down functionality. There is a new premium per user license, which just became available a couple of months ago. And so you can do paginated reports. Again, it's using the Power BI report builder, which is very, very similar to the report builder that I was talking about earlier. So you can do some paginated reports. So definitely a very nice thing. The licensing for premium per user has not been published yet. But everybody has to have that premium per user if they're in that workspace in Power BI. So definitely a bigger discussion. And then you also, I put the APIs in here because the APIs and or OData is how you will get to the data for these types of reporting. So for Excel or for Power BI, it's either using an API or the OData. And so, of course, everybody's like, what the heck is an API? Or the web services. I forgot about web services too. So your API is just basically your application programming interface. So it's kind of I call it the address to get to the data. And so it's like giving a very long URL string. And the web services is kind of the exact same for the OData. So you put this very long string into the products, and then voila, you've got the data. And I say that voila because it is actually pretty simple. You do have to have a license in order to do that. I just had a customer recently who turned off a license for someone and they couldn't get to the data. And I said I was going to keep this on the down low, but we did have a team license for that person. We checked it and it worked, which was way cool because they were just doing data. They're not inside of Business Central. So really they just needed the access to the data for reporting. And it actually worked. So it was pretty cool. So I'll go through just kind of very quickly how to do these. And I have done this in the slides. So kind of what's the difference between Excel, of course, and Power BI? Well, everybody knows Excel is a spreadsheet, right? So left on the screenshot on the left is just basically showing a simple spreadsheet that is connected directly to the data. The one on the right is showing kind of how I can work with that data. So Power Query is a very, very strong tool, which is awesome. So you can build pivot tables. You can do, dashboards and all of that stuff in Excel. Again, connected directly to the data. And then if we get into the Power BI side, again, you can see I have just a little summary trial balance with a little bit of a dashboard bar graph there. So there's a ton of things, obviously, when you get into Power BI, written a ton of reports that just connect to, again, all of the data. I've done it with the APIs. I've done it with the OData feeds. I've done it importing some data from Excel and then kind of smishing it together. So definitely a very, very strong tool for this. And then what you see on the right side again is kind of the Power Query for Power BI, which is extremely similar to what you have in Excel. And then you'll see here too, you can just build out your dashboard, just connecting with those data. So now, what's the difference between Excel and Power BI? Well, of course, I have to own Excel. If I don't own Excel, then I wouldn't be able to use it. It is kind of more locally, I'll say. So it's something where I have it on my desktop or our server, and you are connecting to that local file. So I'm not necessarily uploading that. If I did upload that into like a SharePoint, it wouldn't necessarily refresh up there. So you'd have to play with that a little bit. And then, of course, it is more spreadsheet. So more spreadsheet based. Obviously, you can do dashboards in Excel, but Power BI is really the dashboard, powerhouse over there. So the cool thing about Power BI that you don't actually have to have a license unless you're using, of course, the premium versions and you're wanting to publish it. So that would be local. So I think it's like $10 a month. So very, very very, very inexpensive license. But then you can publish those dashboards out to workspaces in Power BI. And then you can share those with other people. And they can be people that are external of your environment too, which is pretty cool to be able to put that stuff up there. And then of course it is connected because it is, just launching that. Again, if that person's wanting to refresh it, they would have to log in and have access to the data. I say it's a little slightly more complex because it is a little more complex to build Power BI dashboards, but it's not rocket science. It's, it's something that all of us can do. All right. And of course, it is more dashboard based than Excel, even though you can do dashboards in Excel. So now that we've gone through all of that stuff and everybody's kind of pretty much said, oh my gosh, I'm overloaded, let's kind of hop over into a demo and we'll get into Business Central. I'll kind of show you how to export out some of those reports. And then I will kind of show you how to get to those web services so that you can actually get to the data. Now we're over in Business Central. And so, of course, I am signed into my Kronos USA for Business Central. And so, as I was saying, a lot of the reports in there, if I'm just printing reports, I'm going into, some of the different areas in Business Central, and I'll just kind of go into an aged accounts payable. This is some of those standard reports that I was talking about. So, of course, I'm going to fill out what it is I'm trying to print. And then I can go print down here at the bottom. That would print that standard report. And then I can also, don't forget that send to, which I also use a lot. So I could send it to a PDF, send it to Word or Excel. I'm usually using this for Excel. And of course, you can schedule it too. But then that's just kind of a standard report. Very simple. You guys saw that online. Not going to edit that particular report from that particular view. If I'm using those account schedules that we were talking about. So if I go into finance, go into account schedules, this is where I would get into the account schedules. If I'm looking for that, let's say that income statement here, I'm clicked into the income statement. I can come up to the top, and this is that overview that I was talking about. And then I can also edit my layout from in here. So I'll go ahead and wait for that to load. So now I'm in my overview, and this is where, again, you'll notice that I have this drill down functionality available here. And if I click on that, that's going to bring me into another screen where I can see what the detail is of that particular row. And don't forget, if you make your window bigger by the little arrows on the right-hand side. And then, of course, I can continue to drill down. So this is kind of what I really love about the overview in the account schedules area, is I can drill down, continue to see what the detail is behind all of that. So just a very simple little way to get into these particular areas. I can edit this in Excel from here. And then, of course, if I'm in some of those other areas here, I can export it to Excel. And I can create a new document or update a copy of an existing document, which is kind of cool because now I could just put this into an existing Excel document that I have. And again, this is all built off of your chart of accounts. So kind of just, if you have those categories and subcategories, you really don't have to do a whole lot more other than make sure everything is kind of in the column structure that you want or in the row structure. All right, so I'm going to go out of the account schedules because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time in there. But if I'm going to talk about like those standard reports and those other reports there, I'm going to go into what is called the report layout. So if you haven't been there, I highly recommend get in there and understand this because I use it every day. So you'll see that I have a report layout selection and I have a custom report layout selection. So I'm going to go into the report layout selection here. And then there's also, you'll see report selection for sales, purchases, bank account. That's how you're going to assign, like if I was talking about the check format, that's how I can assign what check format I'm using. So now I'm actually in the report layout area. And so if I'm looking for a particular check format, you notice I just went to the search, I typed in check. You can see I have multiple different types of checks down here. So if I'm looking to now edit that check, I can come in, go to process, go to custom layouts up here at the top. I already have this as a custom layout because it showed up here. If I didn't have anything show up here, that's where I could click on new, and I'm going to click on new again. And then here you'll see, this is where I was saying, it's looking at, okay, do you want to insert the Word or insert the Rdlc format? Again, if I chose Word and nothing showed up, that pretty much means I don't have that format in Word, and vice versa. So here I can just say that I'm going to choose the Rdlc because, again, this is a check and this is what I would use for a check. I can hit OK. And actually put the check format up here. I can change the name, which I usually do. And I can also assign a company here. If I don't assign a company there, that means that it's for all companies. So if I'm doing some testing in a test environment, a lot of times I'll make sure and put the test company name there. And, that way I can test a different check format. But now all I have to do is come up here. I could run the report from here if I wanted to try to run it. You do have to have a payment journal in process. And then here I can come up and I can go to layout, and this I can say I want to export the layout or import the layout. So if I export that layout, you're going to see that it will show up down there at the bottom. Mine is actually using a Power BI report builder. So yours would come up with a red little icon instead of that, because it is using the same on my computer. But now here's where I have that check format in that RDLC. As I was saying, everything is an expression, which is kind of, like scary, but I can go down there. I can look at those expressions. I can double click on them. This is where I was saying too, here, that number 81, that's how I know what that field is. And that's just because I've played with it a lot. And so this is how I can see, I can edit that security black out. And like I said, if anybody's looking for that, let me know. Happy to send the cheat sheet that I have for that. But now, again, if I'm, as I was saying, moving fields around, I'm just picking them up, dragging and dropping them. When I'm finished with this, I would just save this report here. And then I would go back in and go back into Business Central, and I would just bring that report back in. So I would import that layout from here. And then I can go back in here and I can run that report to see the changes that I've made. So that is just showing, essentially, that's doing my custom layout. Now, don't forget that you do have to go into the report layout, or I have to go back into that report layout. And this one, sometimes you have to put the whole thing in there. If I go back into that report layout for that check format, and I think it was 10411, I do have to make sure that I change which report I'm wanting to print for that customer. So I do have to say that I'm going to be using my custom layout and not the standard layout. And then in the other area, which is the report selection that I was kind of just very briefly touched on, I do have to come in there to my report selection into my bank account area and make sure that I'm also, for the check here at the top, I have to make sure that I'm using the right format here too. So just because you export it out and modify it and bring it back in does not mean that that's what Business Central thinks you're using. So just making sure that you have to, update all of those different areas. And I always forget one area. And so I always have to go back in and go, why did that print? Oh yeah, I forgot to do the report selection. Okay. So that again is some standard, that's the standard functionality with inside of Business Central for being able to do, like I said, the standard and the RDLC reports. Of course, if I'm dumping that out to Word, I could do a Word format here. I'll just kind of go back for just 1 second and do an invoice format here. So I'm going to go in here and export out a Word format. And so I'm going to again come up here to the top and go to custom layouts. And I can see here I have a bunch of different Word formats. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say that I'm going to export this layout out. So let me export that out. And let me see about opening this guy up here. Make sure he opens on this one. There we go. So this is now opened up. As I was saying, I can see this format. This is where I would be able to change, titles, make font changes, things like that. This is where my developer tab would be up here at the top. If you don't have that, you can come out to File and Options and add that up there at the top. And then here's my XML pane. And as I was saying, on the XML pane over to the right, you may have to change to a different schema over here so that you can get into those different areas. So I know there's a lot of information that I've given in this session too, just kind of how to get into a lot of these. And like I said, it's just a little bit about all of them. The last one that I'm going to talk about is going back into Business Central. So I'm going to come out of here for a second and I'm going to go out to my web services. I'm not going to show the APIs because they are I call it a little more advanced. But in the web services area, here's all of the web services that you can grab and use. They are changing some of this. I only use it for reporting. I don't use it for development. But what I can do is I can grab this URL here. And I could actually log in through the browser, but I'm not going to. But I can grab this URL. I can pop over into Excel. And that's where I can say I'm going to go into my other sources. And I'm going to say from OData feed. And then I could pop this into here. And then I can hit OK. It's going to ask me if I want to log in to Business Central, or it's going to use what I'm logged in as. I usually use organizational account if that pops up. And essentially here is what it would look like. So now I can see the data. If anybody's ever used Power Query, I can transform this data and it'll bring me into Power Query. And then I can go in and make some changes and edit to to this data, change dates, get rid of columns, all that kind of stuff. Do some custom columns. Once I'm finished with that, I would close and load that. And then essentially this is what it would look like inside of Excel. And then of course I can, go through and, build dashboards and things off of that. And the last one I'm going to show is inside of Power BI. So inside of Power BI, I can also, again, get data. You'll notice that in here too, that I can do some, I can get other data. I can go from an OData feed in here. So just different ways to get to that data. So that same OData feed that I had, I can pop that into here and I will see the data exactly the same. And then, of course, I would just build out my data model inside of Power BI. But that's how I can kind of get to that data. Power BI also does have kind of a built-in getting to some of those same web services. A lot of times I'm just very quickly grabbing that information because I know exactly what I'm wanting and I don't have to dig through their standard connector. So this gives you a very, a lot of information in a very short amount of time on all of the different reporting. So again, you will have your standard reporting. You will have, which you can of course edit with Word or the report builder. Then you will also have, again, your Power BI, your Excel using either an API, the web services, which I kind of touched on briefly. And then don't forget about those account schedules for your financials. And then, of course, you can do financial reports inside of Power BI or Excel, which is a lot of what people do as well. So thank you for joining me on my reporting journey at the DynamicsCon 2021 conference or online conference. And again, these are my ways of contact so that if you ever have any questions in the future, I am happy to kind of help you on any reporting needs that you have. Thank you again for joining the DynamicsCon 2021 conference. Hello.
Hello, Tanya. How's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Looking pretty snazzy there in your hat.
I say we're both in green. How about that?
Look at that. I wonder why.
I don't know. Where's your little tattoos at?
I did not stock on tattoos. I'll have to work on that next year.
Yep. Well.
So lots of questions in the chat for your presentation. Is there a particular one that you wanted to start with?
So one of the questions that I happened to see was account schedules and having the page number on them. And, I never look in the right-hand corner, and I quickly printed one, and it actually already has a page number in the right-hand corner. It actually puts the date that you're printing it, the page number, and the user that is printing. So I wasn't sure what that question was necessarily about. I saw somebody say that you would have to edit the Rdlc, but account schedules, you're pretty much doing everything inside of BC. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw lots of questions. So many people requested a cheat sheet. And
yes.
That sounds like that will be a future blog post, a very popular item for a cheat sheet there. So something to look forward to. And your blog is testteam.com, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think that my cheat sheet is kind of in that blog post. If not, I will go update it.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay. So a few questions. I feel free to answer others, but one that I saw is, and I think you answered that, is Power Query a tool in Power BI, or are they different tools? And others responded, Power Query is a Power BI and Excel tool. Do you want to talk more about Power Query?
Yeah, so Power Query, once you get the data into Excel or Power BI, one of the very first things is it loads is it's Power Query. And people may not know that that's what that is. But it allows you to transform the first thing it'll say is once you choose transform the data, I should say, there's a button in the right-hand corner when you're bringing the data in. So it allows you to merge tables together. It allows you to append, change dates, formatting, add columns, conditional columns. It does so much. And so that's kind of the way, if you can't transform your data before you bring it in, you can do it you can do it after. I will say a lot of people will tell you, like, if you're coming from SQL, it's a good idea to let SQL do as much of the work as possible. But obviously Power Query can do all of that.
Okay, great. And there was a question, I don't know which product this is referring to. I'm guessing Power BI, but what is the pricing model for the product? Is it free to small business?
So the pricing model for Power BI, so it is, and there's multiple levels, obviously. So you have Power BI Pro, and you have obviously the free version. And then there is a premium per user, which just came out, I think, last October. Premium per user was previously like $5,000. It was astronomical for most small businesses. So now they came out with the per user. We don't know the pricing on that yet. Regular Power BI Pro is about, I think it's $9.95 or $9.99 a month. And then the other is free for someone to just be able to view it. So if you're needing to publish reports, that's the $9.95. If you're needing to use paginated reports, sorry, Steve, paginated reports, that is the new premium per user and the premium capacity sites and everything.
And do you know if that can be connected to an on-prem version of Business Central, or is that primarily SaaS?
The Power BI?
Yeah.
I would assume it can be connected to an on-prem. I'm assuming, I'm not a nav person, that the backend for nav is SQL.
Yep.
And so it's just like GP then.
So we are focused on the SaaS online version of Business Central, Tanya and I. So we are not as familiar with the requirements or the quirks or limitations of connecting these things to the on-prem version. But there are many people who are focused on on-prem still, and there's some things that are slightly different. So
one of the things for publishing data, if you're trying to publish data, you will have to have what's called a gateway. So for GP, you had to have the gateway installed, and it had to be, obviously connected to a user.
Okay, and I see a couple comments coming in that yes, Power BI has an agent you can install. It can connect to on-prem, so that's great to hear. So, excellent. Okay, so a few questions on RDLC. I'm assuming this is RDLC. What is the most efficient way to add new field to a data set with a report that uses data expressions like the check format reports?
So you'll see that some fields are available, and on the report. A lot of times I'm not usually needing to add a lot of fields. I'm usually needing to hide them, or I may need to copy a field that's already there. Essentially, if you copy and paste it, and I don't know if anybody else has had this issue, but if you copy it and paste it, it actually will mess up the formula. It scrambles the formula. So you have to go back to the original field, like one of them's the vendor name, because you need, you have the name of the vendor that you're paying and the pay to, and then you have it in usually the address area too. So that's one that I always have to go in and copy that field and replace it. So, but it's kind of like Word. You have the XML pane, you can add those fields.
Okay. And if you needed to add an additional field to that report, my recollection is that's not something you can do out of the box with that report. You can't magically add new fields to the data set, right? That would require customization.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And
or not that I know of anyway.
Yeah. And now my understanding is they are working on report extensions. So that would make the report customization process easier. I have not played with that yet. I believe that's brand new, coming out in April, if I'm not mistaken, April 2021. So
I think so. Yeah, I did see it, but I haven't looked at it yet either.
Okay. Did you just edit an RDL in Power BI?
Yeah, that was Sean. Not in Power BI.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say that those are two different technologies, right?
Well, it is, but there's also, with the new paginated reports, there is a Power BI report builder. And so the Power BI report builder actually replaced my report builder, which I used for editing the RDLCs. And so now I actually do edit my RDLCs with Power BI report builder.
Ah, okay, cool. Very neat.
Yeah, that was Sean going, wait a minute, what is she doing?
Very cool. And let's see. Account schedule tip. Lines don't have to show accounts. You can use accounts to gather info, but filter by other things such as dimensions.
Right.
Okay.
So, and I'm not sure if that person was talking about the columns, because you can also filter by dimensions when you print the report, but you can also add columns. So like if you wanted to have your report show all of your global dimensions going across, when you add them in the column structure, kind of like you used to do with the old FRX, and I think Management Reporter, I haven't touched that in years, you could always add the filter down at the bottom for that dimension for that column. I do that all the time. Love that.
Okay.
You could never have done, I don't think you could have ever done that with advanced financials.
Okay. Is it possible to hide the lines based on conditions in a Word layout?
I saw that. I honestly, I don't think so, but I've never really tried. Anybody else on the chat know that answer? I saw that. I'm like, oh, wow. I don't think so,
because do Word layouts have any conditional logic for fields? It's just you slap the field on there and it prints, right?
Yes. Now, one thing I do a lot on the labels, because and I saw this on a forum the other day, was somebody was trying to edit the body text of a Word document. And I am, right or wrong, and somebody can slam me for this one, I will dump the label and put whatever I want on there. So I actually don't use I'll call it a dynamic label. I will just delete the label and just type in the same cell in Word.
Okay.
Yeah. And a little tip on that is I use my grid lines. So I'll actually throw the grid lines on there so that I can see the table structure. And merge columns and things like that. And then I will hide them. Much like what Jeremy said, which I thought was a really cool tip, Jeremy, was, he said in Report Builder, he actually changes the color. Kind of like, I think what we used to have in Report Builder. Was it called Report Builder? What was it called? What
Report
was the GP
Writer?
one? Report Writer.
Yeah,
I don't even remember it now.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah.
Report Writer, where it used to have the different colors in the background. So I think that was what Jeremy was talking about. I was like, that's a great tip. I didn't even think about that.
Excellent. Yep. And I agree. When you have different report sections and different lines, you're trying to troubleshoot where the formatting is or where the data is coming from. It's old programming trick. You just leave some breadcrumbs to figure out where things are occurring. Yeah.
There you go. I do want to address the one thing everybody was saying about the micker. And I think Sean actually said, there's so much flexibility for moving things around. One of the things that I had a customer who had their check on the bottom. And I fought with that quite a bit, trying to get it to actually print in the right area. And one thing that I learned is I couldn't move it any lower, but what I learned I could do is I could move the margins. And so once I moved the margins down, instead of having a margin that was standard, it actually moved it down enough so that it was perfect for the bank. So that is definitely a tip.
Got it. And I've had other discussions or seen other discussions where people are asking about the micker validation process. How has that been for you with at least US banks, obviously?
I had somebody call me last Friday about it. And honestly, I've done it like 3-4 times and I have had nobody have issues with it. The symbols, there was a symbol on there. So I just copied the symbol, kind of what I did was copy the symbol and put it in, in the places, the other fields that were needed. And I have not had a knock on wood. I shouldn't say that. Haven't had any issues with the micker fonts. And it was funny because the person that called me said, well, yeah, we had to buy the micker fonts. And I'm like, why did you buy the micker fonts? It's all standard.
It's standard with BC. Interesting. And I suspect banks in the US will vary based on how strict they are. For instance, Bank of America, my impression is they are very lax and like if they can process it, they'll figure out a way. Whereas another bank or a credit union may be much more strict about how they implement their micker validation process. So,
well, one of them that I did was Wells Fargo. 2 others were local banks. I think one of them was Bank of America too, but the other 2 were local banks.
Okay.
So just small local banks, no issues.
Okay. Let's see. Can you tell us about automatically printing a set account schedules with different column layouts?
Set account schedules. Do they mean...
Or printing account schedules with different column layouts? Is that possible?
Yep. So that's what I was talking about earlier, that when you go into the column lines, you do actually have to personalize the column layout and you have to add the dimensions there because they actually do, like the dimension field does not appear. So you have to personalize that window to add the dimension lines. I think it's only 1 and 2. I'm not absolutely positive because I've not had anybody need to print a financial down to the 3rd or 4th dimension. Mainly it was usually 1 or 2. So when you put that column there, so you'll just start with, like column 1, I always do as like the account and of course all that stuff. But I'll do that as my, the first one will be my consolidated. So I'll do, a consolidated. My next line will be like, you'll add the dimension there. And then you just basically continue it goes down. It doesn't go across, which is kind of weird. But as you add lines in there, then each line is the next dimension. It's really hard to explain without seeing that one, I think.
I see Cynthia did reply to that. I'm not sure how you'd automatically print an account schedule with different column layouts. However, when printing through the request page, you can select different column layout names there. So
you can. Yep.
Okay. Let's see what other ones we have here. Let me scroll down. Yes.
Somebody
Okay.
said word layouts are only simple.
Yes.
Christoph, I think, said that.
Is there a preferred way to design a report that will be used for mailing purposes, such as a custom layout or word layout? I'm assuming that's like physical paper mail printing, and I guess you just trial and error, get the format set up.
For what report?
Sheila didn't specify, but let's see. Scrolling down. Okay. Wow. I'm trying to catch up here.
I know, I see that.
Okay, so Waldo says no hiding or conditional stuff in Word reports. That's why we all love Rdlc. Yes, I hear that Rdlc is one of the favorite things to do in the Business Central world. I personally have not had the honor of doing it yet, but
sounds like a good video, Steve.
yes, long down on my list. And Dave Feenstra says, I've moved reports to Rdlc if I need to start doing conditional formatting. That makes sense. And okay. And a good point from Henrik. Business Central is an international product, right? Mm-hmm. And so he points out that there may be some challenges with multi-language customers. And if you're working with just English, that's one thing. If you're working in another language, then that may be fine in that one language. If you're having to switch between languages, that may open up an entirely different set of challenges. So that's a very good point from Henrik, that multi-language is an entirely new dimension and considerations for designing these reports. Okay, turning on grid lines is a great tip. Thank you for that. And let's see, any other topics you wanted to cover, Tanya?
That was all I got out of the chat, a little bit of the chat earlier, but I haven't been able to necessarily watch it.
Okay, so I'm checking. Sean says Bank of America can be a bear in his experience. Smaller banks are actually not a problem. Interesting. Yep. Okay, so with MICR validation, the bigger banks may be more stringent. Jamie says that she has not had any problems reading banks reading MICR. Banks tend to be more flexible. And of course, anyone outside the US is kind of wondering, what are you talking about with this MICR business?
Yes. I saw that one. Jeremy said, that's what's so great about moving out of the US. No MICR, no nothing, no checks.
Yep, and that is an anachronism of United States banking that we are clinging to, just like the imperial system, right? Imperial measurements.
I haven't written a check, and I couldn't even tell you how long.
I just finished the check register that I have been using for, I think, over 15 years. I just finished out the last line in that check register, and I think I'm going to frame it. So, okay. I'm just scrolling through the comments.
Sorry, no Barclays in the UK. Not me, anyway.
Yes.
I have had a Switzerland customer, but we didn't have to do MICR. It was all EFT.
Analysis views. Couple points about analysis views to get the shortcut dimensions. And with analysis view tied to the column layout, you can do up to 4 dimensions.
There you go. Yep.
Okay. Got it.
And I don't use analysis. I've used it in the past, and I need to do a video about it because it's actually a really cool tool, but I haven't played with it in probably about a year. To me, it reminds me of NGP, when you used to be able to, basically you're grouping accounts together to be able to see I think it's called account groups in NGP is what it was.
Okay, and we have just 1 or 2 more minutes left. Can we set report orientation dynamically in Rdlc depending on the columns in column layout account schedule? So if you have one format that's portrait and then you need to switch to landscape, have you had to do that? Depending on how many columns?
I have had to do it, but I actually didn't do it in Rdlc. I did it in Word.
Ah, okay.
So I was actually able to do a purchase order. I've never had a customer in all of my years want a purchase order that was landscape. And in the Rdlc, I thought it was too hard and too many fields to be able to move. So I actually was able to do it in Word. And it only took me like an hour to do. Pretty simple.
Got it. And Carrie Peters, welcome.
Hi, Carrie.
There's lots you can do using export to Excel to closely approximate multiple column layouts, but there is no automation. Okay. Let's see. Be aware of account schedule versus account schedules on menus in BC. So those are 2 different things in BC.
I wasn't quite sure. I use account schedules all the time.
Okay.
I saw that too.
Okay, and Christoph says he has a blog about word layout for email. And Yes,
Okay.
I'm trying to keep up with the questions here, and we are wrapping up soon. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for all the questions, and Tanya, thank you for your session.
Thank you, Steve, for helping out last minute.
Okay.
All right. I will
Talk to
see
you later,
you
everyone.
at our networking this afternoon for BC.
Yes. Okay.
So
Thanks for joining,
everybody
everyone.
join, bring your questions.